Hello and welcome to Money and Impact. My name is Suzanne Caldera. I'm a mortgage lender. I've been in lending for 24 years, deal with so much to do with money, how people need to figure out how to use money and for their down payments, for keeping their homes, to everything in between. And the other title to my show is Impact. And throughout the course of my life and career, I've been pretty lucky to meet some impactful people that have affected me. And today we're sitting with one of those people that hits both the money and the impact, and that's Allan from the 7 Secrets.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm doing awesome.
This is great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, it is an absolute delight being able to sit with you, get to know you a little bit better, and let the viewers know what makes you such a cool guy. So,
wow, a cool guy. I like that.
Yeah. I was going to go on and on, but you know, we gotta get to the questions. So you started the 7 Secrets Sales Academy. What drove you to start that?
Well, I've been in sales it's about 27 years now, and a lot of that was in-home selling. I was visiting people in their homes, selling roofing, siding, windows, sunrooms. Spent the last 15 years selling Andersen windows, and I was always one of the top sales reps, and was always asked to help other reps and get up to the front of the room and help them with some processes and things. And being a writer at heart, I said, you know what, let me write a book about sales and why I'm successful. And the book, what I wasn't expecting was the book became a bestseller. And then from there, people, when I started doing speaking engagements, would come up to me afterwards and said, hey, can you train my team? And then the light bulb went off, because I was selling for many, many years and I was getting a little burnt out. I'm like, maybe this is my next career. So I started the 7 Secret Sales Academy, where now I go into companies and help them train their salespeople.
And who are your target people or the best people for you as a trainer, Allan?
So my niche is the in-home selling industry, so people who sell to homeowners, whether it's, again, roofing, siding, windows, but landscaping, hot tubs, painters, carpenters. But I also deal with a lot of realtors, and because they're dealing with homeowners. And sales is all psychological, and no matter what you sell, it's kind of, the brain works the same way. So yes, I have a niche, that's my niche that I focus on, but if you sell widgets, I can help you sell them better. So it's all about the psychology of sales and getting away from the old time selling philosophies of high pressure and always be closing and all of those ridiculous concepts that have been out there.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I'm an old school salesperson and never knew that I'd get into sales. But when I got into sales, it was the auto industry, and there was a lot of, hey, what do you think it'll take? I can't even do those things. What will it take for you to buy it today?
Yeah, exactly. To drive off the lot with this car today, or something ridiculous. Or is this the kind of window you see in your home? Like all these ridiculous sales questions that we were trained to ask back then.
Yeah. And where did you see that started to change? I'm curious on that.
Well, in the research I did for my book, it was, you saw where it started back in the P.T. Barnum days when they had the snake oil salesman, that sold that fake stuff. And then, then you get to Always Be Closing from Glengarry Glen Ross and Tin Men movies. And sales just became, something to get one over on a customer. Wasn't built in trust, and wasn't built in anything, but let me see how much money I can get from this customer. Where it changed is when the internet came out. When the internet came out in 1996, it went from the salesperson being in charge of the appointment to the customer being in charge, because now the customer was armed with what I call informational ammunition to protect themselves from the salesperson. No longer did the salesperson have all the information. Because really, when you met with a salesperson, let's say it was 1965 and you had to put a new roof on your house, you had no idea what a roof was. You might have seen something in a magazine or on a billboard, but that was it. Or your friend told you about somebody. But now, you go to a house to sell anything, they've researched you for 5 hours on the internet. So you're no longer in charge. You have to be the advisor now rather than the seller. And that's what's really changed. But you still have so many people still trying the old-time sales tactics and strategies that just don't work anymore.
Do you find that people in the trades are behind on that?
100%.
Yeah.
Even the larger companies are behind on it. They still follow these. You have to have a process in sales, but you can't have a script. And when you're scripted and when you don't listen to a customer, So many sales reps ask a question, and then instead of listening to the answer, they think about the next question to ask, and the next question may have nothing to do with what the customer just said. So then you sound like an idiot. You're like, well, wait a minute, the customer feels like you didn't even listen to what I just said. Now you don't make a sale because they're so focused on, I got to make sure I hit all of my points, rather than being relaxed and being someone that served them and helped them and figure out what they need, because quite often you don't have to go through 90% of what they train you.
So when you were talking about, you know, the roofer and doing the 5 hours of research, and I had asked you about, do you feel that people in the trades are behind? And granted, I know that there's people in my industry behind. What do you think is the reason that people in the trades have been slower to adopt more of a consultative or a helping process?
What I've seen in the trades is the successful companies, or the companies that have been around a long time, are kind of generational. So Grandpa started the company in 1921. Joe, the son, took it over, and now he's giving it to his son. But the sales philosophies kind of stay the same. The newer companies, the companies that are owned by the younger people that started it maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, embrace more of the consultative selling. Not all of them. Like, you still have the companies out there, I won't name them, but they're large home improvement companies, and they have a very strict process to follow. And now there are AI software and things that actually can monitor a rep in the house and find out how many words he's saying to the customer and how many words the customer is saying back. And it's getting so automated, and you can't take the human out of sales. You just can't. Anytime you're in a face-to-face situation, I don't care how much AI or how much technology is out there, this is never going to be replaced, and that's what sells. You know, I did a post on LinkedIn just the other day about the inane, unbelievable amount of messages we're getting now on LinkedIn that are written by robots. And these people are hiring these marketing companies to write these messages for them, and they're pissing off 99.9% of people that they're reaching out to. It's not worth the one person that you actually get in touch with. So I think there's an old school philosophy to it, and I also think that, you know, in the trades, you have a lot of people who are like carpenters first, and then they want to start their own company, and they don't really know any sales process at all. They don't even have websites, some of them. I just did a talk yesterday for Rhode Island Builders Association, and out of 35 people in the room, I think 4 didn't even have websites. Wow. So it's kind of crazy, but there's still a lot out there that need help.
And you know, you settled on 7 secrets as opposed to 3 or 4 or 5. Was that by design?
Yes.
Or, okay.
It started at 10.
Okay.
And there's a lot of 10 of everything, but I'm a big psychological guy for numbers and pricing, as you know.
Yeah.
7 is a very, very comfortable number for the human brain. It's a number that attracts people. I could have said the top 10 secrets. That's okay, but it's an overdone kind of. But when you say 7 or 3, any type of odd number, the brain is attracted to it. If I said 4 secrets, wouldn't have been nearly as impactful. So 7 secrets was. I started with 10, but I'm like, well, you know what? I don't really need these 3, and then I kind of combined them together, and 7 was really a strong number. Plus, it's really what I've used to become successful.
Do you have a favorite secret in the book?
There's 2 favorites. 2 most effective of the book is how to present your price properly. Most business owners and sales reps get that wrong. They don't know how to prepare a customer for a price, nor do they know how to present the price to the customer. Like, say, go back to the roofing example. Here you go, Suzanne. It's $23,471 for your roof. Yes or no? You have sticker shock. I don't care what you're thinking. You're always going to think that price is expensive. You have to do comparison pricing. You have to give them 3 options. That's number 1. The second thing is body language. So many sales reps don't pay attention to a customer's body language. They just keep talking. It's funny, if I go into a room, let's say there's 1,000 salespeople in the room, and I say, who in here pays attention to body language? All 1,000 will raise their hand. Then I'll say, okay, when you see something within the body language, what do you do about it? Crickets. So everyone registers body language, but they just keep talking anyway. Someone could like literally glance at their watch because they're so bored with what you're saying, and they'll just keep talking. It'll register, oh, he glanced at his watch, but I'm going to keep talking about the stuff that's making him glance at his watch. So body language and how to present price are probably two of the most critical things that I train all the time.
Do you think there's a difference between men and women in sales?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and I say this in the in-home selling industry all the time, and if you're a contractor listening to this show, hire more female salespeople. They do very, very well in homes. They're more trustworthy. They're more gregarious. They don't come across as salesy. Here's a great example of this. If you Google salesman, M-A-N, salesman images on Google, just click on images, all the schwarmy, Wolf of Wall Street, the guy holding up the contract, all those pictures come up. If you Google saleswoman, all professional people like yourself come up. There's no perception of a sleazy saleswoman, it's all salesmen. So that's why women salespeople do very, very well.
And did you study NLP? Like what?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I've looked at NLP. It's got a lot of great, there's a lot of great strategies and techniques, and I just love looking at studies. And if the brain works a certain way, and all our brains work a certain way, why not take advantage of that? If the brain likes 7s and 9s, then end your pricing in 7 and 9s. Like that's what the brain likes. Why? Let's say you're a service provider. Let's say you do in-house staging, for example, for real estate, and you charge $4,000. $4,000 looks fat, heavy, and expensive to the brain. $39.97 looks like a great price. It's only a $3 difference. But so many people, especially people who own their own businesses and service providers, end everything in zeros. And they're killing themselves because people just like, ooh, that's expensive. If you gave a proposal and yours was $4,000, same exact service is $39.97, the customer's picking the $39.97, 100% of the time.
How did you get into sales?
Sort of by accident. I actually spent 15 years in college athletics, marketing and fundraising. And talk about a job that'll burn you out. I was working, not joking, 90 hours a week. I had to travel with all the teams. I had to run alumni functions. I was there from 7 in the morning till midnight, many nights. I was at Columbia University in New York City, so I was kind of one step below the head athletic director, and I thought my career I wanted to be an athletic director, and I did it for 15 years, and I got completely burnt out. And this is a funny story. So one night I'm out with a buddy of mine. I lived in New Jersey at the time, and we're just having dinner, and he actually was in sales at the time. He sold advertising, and I was just telling him, I think I got to do something else. I'm so burnt out. And he's just eating. He goes, why don't you get into sales? And I said to him, sales? I said, who the hell wants to be a salesman? And he put his fork down and looked at me. He goes, you're in sales now. I'm like, I'm not in sales. He goes, dude, don't you sell season tickets? Don't you try to get stories in newspapers? Aren't you asking alums for money every day? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you're in sales. You just don't even know it. And it was really like a slap in the face. So many people are in sales and they don't think they are because it has a negative connotation. So without thinking, and I don't recommend this to anybody, but I gave my 2 weeks notice without having another job because that's how burnt out I was. And some local sunroom dealer took a flyer on me. I had no in-home selling experience. He just liked me and he hired me. That was my first selling job. And I learned to sell sunrooms, and then from there I went to Home Depot, and I was selling for Home Depot, and that's when I learned windows and siding and roofing. And then I spent the rest of my career at Anderson after that.
Did they walk you through their process, and is that how you kind of morphed into, hey, this is going to be my process? Like, how did this morphing happen?
It's a great question. What I've learned over the years and dealing with so many companies now and training them is what they call sales process is really product training. Mm-hmm. Sales training for most of these companies that sell products is product training. And at the end, they teach you how to sell it, which is basically, this is the order you have to show the product. Mm. So for example, I'll give you a great example with the sunroom. See, products and features don't sell. Emotion sells, okay? When I was hired by the sunroom company, they sent me to Buffalo, New York in January for 9 days of sales training. 9 days. I still have PTSD from this week and a half I was up there. I could still tell you the length of the screws, the R value of the roof, the glass thickness, the hardware, the rollers. I can tell you everything because it was drilled into us. We took test after test after test. And at the very end, they showed us this is how you present all of these products to the customer. Not how to sell it, how to present it in this way. So they made us walk in with the big bags, and which is very intimidating for a homeowner, and try to sell a sunroom. And the national average of closing percentage across the entire country for all of these dealerships was 16%.
Oof.
So 84 out of 100 appointments were telling them no, which is, I'm going to jump off a bridge if that was me. And it was me because I was following their process, and I was basically 1.5 out of 10 people were buying. I just couldn't take it. And finally one day I'm like, you know what, I'm leaving, because it just felt wrong.
Yeah.
I'm leaving my bags in my car. I'm going to go in. I'm just going to ask them what they want. And I went into this lovely older couple. I'll never forget them. Had just my clipboard. And I said, so how can I help you guys? And they walked me outside, and they had a really nice deck, beautiful backyard. And they said, we love our deck. We love our backyard, but we can only use it 2 or 3 months a year because it's too hot in the summer, can't use it in the winter. We'd love to think about putting a sunroom here. And all I did was I looked around and I said, wow, imagine on a beautiful December day with the snow falling, you're in your nice warm sunroom, drinking a cup of coffee, watching the deer walk through your yard. And the woman's knees buckled. She punched her husband in the arm. She goes, that's what I want. And literally 45 minutes later, not even an hour, I sold him a $65,000 sunroom, and I never showed him one thing about the product.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that the processes were wrong and that emotion sells. And I just honed my career from that point. But that was a very pivotal point in my career and I still remember it to this day, that her reaction to me saying, sitting in your sunroom watching the deer, it was like her face just lit up. She could care less about the R value of the roof or the thickness of the screws. Nobody cares about that. You have to put people in the position of what it's like, to imagine what it's like to own your product or service, and then you'll sell more.
And as you ascended and started getting success, was either there resentment from the other sales associates, or did management try to get you into management so that you could train others and raise others up?
So it was an interesting journey because I was at it when I went and ended up at Anderson, because there was over 80 sales reps there. So of course there was some jealousy, some resentment, but most people were happy for my success and wanted to learn from me, which was great. And yes, they asked me to be a sales manager many times, and you couldn't pay me enough to be a sales manager. I just don't want to deal with all those personalities and all the admin stuff that goes with it. That's not me. I wanted to sell. But here's the funny thing. Anderson had a process, right? And the new people would come in and follow the process. When I offered to run appointments with these guys, they actually told me no, because they didn't. This was a quote from one of my bosses back then. We don't want you to mess them up. Here's the best salesman in the company offering to run an appointment with the worst salesman in the company, and they told me no because they need to follow the process. You just do what you do. Just keep doing, but they're not following the process. So it was that corporate mentality of, you know what? These guys need to learn the process, and I get that. They need to learn the process, but they also need to learn the psychology of the conversation. And a process, if you're following a robotic process, you're not following any psychology, body language, anything. You're not reading the customer, and therefore you're going to have a 20% closing percentage. Where
do you get the most joy from the book and from your trainings?
When people tell me how much it's helped them. When I get those, it's like, this is why I do this, because I absolutely love what I do right now. And I really enjoyed sales, but I got to a point where I was burnt out. Now I never feel like I'm working. But when I get someone that sends me an email, says, your training was great, I just sold 4 jobs last week that I wouldn't have sold, or this is on my LinkedIn profile, I had a guy literally message me on LinkedIn and said, your book changed my life.
Wow.
I was a terrible salesperson. I had no self-confidence. I read your book. I started following your secrets. He goes, and now I'm one of the top 3 salesperson in the country. Now I can take my family on vacations.
Oh.
That was it almost made me cry. That's what, I think I hit the microphone, sorry. That's what drives me. When people say, this really helped me, there's nothing better than that. It really isn't.
So you mentioned that LinkedIn post, and I think that's the one that I shared. And you come from a place of help.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of salespeople miss the boat, is that they're coming from a lot of type A, high-level salespeople. And we're selfish.
Yeah,
We're
of
just,
course.
we're thinking about ourselves. We're all on to the next goal. But when you reframe and you think like, I want to come from a place of help,
Yeah.
you can still be extremely successful. What do you think stops people from wanting to, not that they don't want to help people, but that they're just so focused on like the numbers and,
It's the inherency of sales.
Okay.
It's basically, when you're selling something, you're going to make money from selling it. You're not just doing like a task.
Yeah.
So that inherently is going to make you a little selfish. But here's the hard part. The thing that people need to understand is the more you actually lead with helping mindset than a selling mindset, you'll actually sell more. I always tell people, you need to leave that customer with an unbelievable experience, whether they buy from you or not. I got my best referrals from customers who did not buy from me because they had a great experience. They were not expecting the sales guy to actually listen to them and give them a great experience. And if they, at the end of the appointment, they were like, kind of disappointed, like, I really want your windows, but I just can't afford them, which was totally understandable because they were a very expensive window. But you know what? My mom, who lives in Barrington, can afford these windows. I'm going to have her call you because you were great.
Yeah.
Those are the best referrals you can get. But most reps, especially in the in-home world, if you don't buy, they're like, okay, great, thank you for your time, and then they're off and they leave them with a bad experience. You need to go in saying, I'm here to help you, whatever that entails. Whether it's working with me or working with someone I can refer to you or whatever it is, I'm going to leave this relationship is going to be something where you know that I've helped you, and that's all I care about. And that leads to more sales.
Now with 7 Secrets and with you going into companies, are you finding that more companies are approaching you, or is it more where you're going to companies saying, hey, I can help you increase your sales by 10, 20, or 40%?
Well, most of my work now comes from referrals. When I actually reach out, it's a great question. It's almost like a fight. Like, well, our sales are good. We don't need to. And I will tell me what you mean by good. Well, we're closing 28%. Well, that's not good. So that, and then I put it in perspective. I make them look at it from the other side of the glass. Let's say you're closing 30%. That means 70 out of 100 customers you're seeing are saying no to your company. Is it good now? I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way. See, 30% is not successful. 50% is pretty good. But you even want to be more than that. And if you could train your reps to lead with helping and become that company, that salesperson that they're not expecting, you'll actually make a lot more money. But accepting the fact that I want a 30% closer is just not great business, in my opinion, anyway.
What is the industry standard for people in the trades, the window people and whatnot?
No, it's pathetic. It's about 29%.
Oof.
Yeah, it's bad. I think the last statistic I saw across all industries in the United States, the closing percentage, you ready for this, is 24%. So that tells me there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any industries that you're thinking, hey, this is my next industry that I think can be a good niche for me?
There's so much work in the contractor industry, I haven't thought about that. But I would say the next industry I've done the most work in has probably been real estate, as far as giving workshops and things.
Sure.
But I've gone into I've done a lot of work in building supply companies, which is sort of contracting. They're dealing with contractors, so they have the same mentality. You get those type of companies that are in what I call the commodity hurricane of just taking orders rather than selling. And there's a whole other process of that. Like someone calls to order decking material, and you just say, okay, great, that's going to be $3,000. Have a nice day, rather than having a conversation about, well, what are you doing? Tell me about the job. Oh, did you think about putting a patio door in? It's called proactive selling rather than reactive selling. And you bring up these concepts that to me are very common sense, and people are blown away by them. Like, oh my God, I never thought about bringing up a patio door, because they're so focused on this is a transaction, not a helpful selling, not a service situation.
Allan, with typical contractors, what do you think is their typical sales process or their steps that they take?
Well, I think there's different levels. Like you got this solo guy who has like 4 guys working for him, and he's the owner and he's the salesperson. And quite often those guys are successful by accident because they don't really have a sales process, but they're the owner. So homeowners like to talk to the owner, but they're probably missing out on jobs just because they don't know what they're doing, so they don't have a sales process. So those types of companies, when they're ready to scale or grow and want to hire a sales rep or two, they need a process. And they need a process that's based in psychology of selling, which is what I would do. But then you get the ones that have 10 or 12 reps, and they've been doing it for years, and they're $4, $5 million companies, and they're fairly successful, but they're the ones that, there's two types. They're the ones that think they're good and they know everything and they don't want to learn anything, or the ones like, all right, I want to scale, how do I do this? And then they talk to me, and I'm like, this is how you're going to scale. First of all, we got to get your closing percentage up from 30% to at least 45% for your reps. Just that alone will help you, going to increase your revenue by 45%. So those things are, but the typical contractor falls into the typical salesperson where people don't want to meet with salespeople and they don't want to meet with contractors. It's like a necessary evil, like, oh, I need a new deck. I gotta try to find a contractor now, right? Or I need a new roof, I gotta call the sales roofing guy over. They don't want to do that. So if you become that person they're not expecting, like I said, it's just so much easier to sell. The bar is pretty low for contractors. Unfortunately, I know you're listening to contractors, but the bar's low. If you have a labeled truck and a nice shirt and clean boots, you're way ahead of 80% of other contractors. You know this in the mortgage and real estate industry.
Yeah, and I think of contractor, even personal things that my wife and I have dealt with, where they don't show up, or they take your money and then still ghost you.
Criminal, yeah.
Yeah, like what is up with them? But do you teach follow-up in your in your book?
Follow-up is, I basically say, you want to get better than 80% of your competitors? Call someone back. Number one, call them back. Because that's one of the biggest consumer complaints for contractors is they don't follow up, they don't call back. Or they come over, this is even worse, come over, measure your house, show you everything, and then never send you a quote.
Yes.
Like, what? So,
it is so true.
It really is. So it's a low bar, but you can literally put yourself up here in the top 10% of contractors by doing some really basic stuff. And then from there, just having a really helpful conversation rather than a selling conversation, and you'll just sell a lot more. You really will.
Allan, I got to say, you really helped me a lot today. And for the viewers that are watching this last piece of what Allan says, if you're a contractor, those are golden nuggets. And for more information on today's guest, please check out the credits. And that's Money and Impact, and I'm Suzanne Caldera. Thank you.